episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor. Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of the show with another really fascinating guest for you today, helping to create a better tomorrow on many different fronts. Today, we have the honor of being joined by Mr. Barry Dean, who is an award-winning songwriter turned wheelchair technology entrepreneur. And he is the chief executive officer of a company called Lucy, which is reimagining mobility for power wheelchairs and other technologies. And Barry is involved in setting the strategic vision, leading the company towards its goals of providing security, stability, connectivity for power wheelchairs. And the company, interesting, was founded by him, his brother Jared, back in 2017, all with the hopes of building a smarter solutions for his daughter Catherine, and basically all power wheelchair riders at that. And it's a really interesting story. Independent of Lucy, Barry has written multiple #1 singles, including Pontoon, Day Drinking, Somebody's Daughter, Think a Little Less, along with top 40 hit Girls Chase Boys, and was nominated for a Grammy for Best Country Song on Tim McGraw's Diamond Rings and Old Bar Stools. Additionally, Barry is a founding writer at Creative Nation Music. He is part of the Grammy Recording Academy Nashville chapter as a governor, and has previously served 2 terms as a board member of Nashville Songwriters Association International. And prior to becoming a songwriter, Barry led market strategy and product development for a education technology company. Barry lives down in Nashville, Tennessee with his family, and this is going to be a really exciting show. So all that being said, Barry Dean, thanks so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Thank you for letting me be here. It's an honor. Thank you so much.
It's a great thing having you. It's a fascinating story, and like I typically do, I'd love to hand you the floor for a little bit. Usually, I ask guests to talk about themselves, but if you could talk about a little bit about yourself, about Jared, and if you really could introduce Catherine and her story as part of that, I think the 3 components of this are really, really fascinating. Let's start off there.
I think Catherine, our daughter, was born 16 weeks early. So she was a micro preemie, they call them, I think. And it was, we are unfamiliar with any of that when it happened. We lived in Kansas. I hadn't moved to Nashville. I didn't start writing until I was much older, moved here at 38 as a songwriter, which is not the typical path. And But she was born very early, and we were very typical, I think, of parents in that situation, where we made a commitment early on. We're not going to, we're going to push forward. We're going to look for new technology. We're going to look for outside the box thinking about how to help her quality of life. She has cerebral palsy, so that means she had a bleed in the brain. I guess all your viewers would know that, and so we started pushing for walking. That was a real, we had the walkers, and we used special clinics that have these things called loco mats, or a harness with legs that help teach the body how to move. And so we did all those kinds of things. But there was a point when we were told, hey, she's probably when she was around 5, when we were told, look, she's going to need a power wheelchair. And I think we're like a lot of parents, we immediately begin thinking, well, are we giving up on her? Are we giving up too soon? I don't want to be that guy, right? And then they said, well, can we have your insurance card? So I did that. What's her favorite color? I told them. And we're thinking, do we need one of those vans? Do we need to remodel the house? All of our mindset, if you will, had been focused on how to rehab, how to get her back to a normal we understood. But there was a situation here where now we were going off that map and realizing, she's not going to rehab back to what I'm considering typical. She's going to have her own path, and we need to help with that path. And so we got her power wheelchair, and learning how to drive. The first thing she did when she got her chair there in the clinic, she hit the trigger to go forward. The speed hadn't been adjusted, and they'll go 6 or 7 miles an hour. And it took off down the hallway. I'm dragging on the back, and so is the salesman, into a wall. Unfortunately, she was not hurt. The wall was hurt, but she was not hurt. And, but it was at that point I was like, this is crazy, because they weigh, you know, 300 pounds or more. And so to be honest, I left the chair parked for quite a while in the garage while I determined whether my 5-year-old could understand the safety elements of this. But then she learned to drive it, and she's a great driver. And so that's how she got involved. And our story with Lucy kind of parallels that. We were, I was in a songwriting session with an artist, and my collaborator suddenly had to leave because his mother, it turns out, had the same kind of wheelchair my daughter had. And she had turned just a little too soon on a ramp there on a sidewalk, and it had flipped that chair over. And that particular model, it took 2 3/4 inches to flip the chair. And so it's a little heavier than 300 pounds, threw her to the ground. She was quite injured. He had to leave. I came home and start looking around for, wow, what do we do? You know what? I'm going to go online. This has got to have been solved, right? And I looked, couldn't find it. I called my brother, who's had a decade of engineering at that point or more in systems engineering and product design, and said, hey, I'm looking for this. And we realized there wasn't a solution. We couldn't believe it. And so we decided, let's see if we can solve it. We'll give it a little time. We weren't trying to start a company. We were trying to just meet a need.
So. And, you know, it's interesting because continuing along, and thank you for sharing that part of the story. And, I went into some of your materials about Lucy, and, you make these very important points. You talk about mobility is not just getting from A to B. This is a beautiful world, but it's extremely dangerous. And you point things out like drop-offs, cracks in sidewalks, ramps. And then you went on a little bit of a journey in the materials. You talk about, you went to automobile crash sites, you went to other non-traditional places where this wheelchair will go. Talk a little bit about your sort of the time you're sort of on the road investigating what the world holds in terms of the beauty, but the dangers for these types of machines.
It was interesting once, Catherine got older and we were looking at these situations and we couldn't find a solution. We're working with, sensors and trying to see how we might do it. And so we decided we'll go to the International Seating Symposium. That's the big show, the big convention. And surely it will be there. And we go and we meet with the companies. There's very few that make these chairs. And that's when we realized, they're not working on it. It's hard to do. There's not a financial immediate incentive to do that. And so we just realized, boy, this is not getting done. And the things that I would expect of something that cost as much as a Tesla, it really does. The retail on Catherine's chair, MSRP, is $81,000. And it has a seat belt. That's its, thing. And so you're like, we got to do a little better. And they're mechanically, they're well made and they're fine. But it was like an area that time forgot a little bit when it came to connectivity and safety protocols and those kinds of things. And so we started working on our prototypes. She starts driving it around and we're testing it. And then we began working with a team in right outside Seattle on Bainbridge Island that had worked in autonomous vehicles. And they introduced us to a team in Michigan who had worked in that space as well, but also in other automotive areas. And we start going, well, again, not trying to start the company to make it. We'll work on the IP, the technology design, and we'll try to get great, we'll just go where there are great teams. We went to Ireland and worked with a medical software team that's renowned for its processes and just tried to do the best job we could do building that. But at a certain point, we realized we're going to start the company and sell this. So we really worked from 2017 on. We were developing IP, developing the technology to do that. We worked with Intel and Texas Instruments. They've been great partners. We actually developed a millimeter wave radar with Texas Instruments. And so those were all things we did not have on what we were going to do when we started, but the need was there. And we were making headway, and we could tell when we were working with those companies, they were impressed that this could have application elsewhere. But we tried to stay focused in this market to start, just really focus on what we were doing. Of course, we're meeting and this is the most important, I should have started with this. We were meeting other people living with disabilities of different kinds
Mm-hmm.
in power wheelchairs. So our stories and our use cases are growing. And when we first started with the team in Seattle, you know, I'm a songwriter, and my brother's really, you know, very bright. And we got there and I said, you know, I'll get lunch, talk to this guy, you know, or made some joke like that. And which is a very Nashville thing to do. And, but the gentleman in charge there said, you know, if you can tell stories, I need you to write everything you want wheelchairs to do in the next 20 years. And that's what I want to start with, is a vision for what it could be. And so we worked the first several months writing story after story. Then we selected 42 stories and then brought those 42 as, you know, this is going to be the first game that we're looking at. This is the vision we're looking at. And we knew that if we could get the right sensor technology and the right brain, put a brain on it, and then connect it in the right way, all these other things would be possible. You could develop software developer kits. You could have open APIs, all the things you would need to see an industry lift. And our advisors were people who precision agriculture, you know, really revolutionized that. One of our advisors, autonomous driving. So they were used to lifting much bigger industries. So that's how we kind of got into that, you know.
Excellent. And, you know, continue along that, you know, obviously smart is a very, you know, hot theme nowadays. We have our smartphones, we have our smart homes, smart cars, you mentioned. So here, you know, in the Lucy material, we have this definition, or even definition, smart power wheelchair is integrated or retrofitted with technology that provides enhanced independent mobility to a wheelchair user health and wellness data collection capabilities, and our connectivity to integrate with connected worlds. Wonderful definition. And, you know, I'd love to, once again, drill down to some of what you're doing here, because I think it's fascinating. One of the points that you make in the, when we're talking about the autonomy now, you basically make this point we don't really think about, that autonomy is not synonymous with mobility, especially when it comes to wheelchairs. This is not the same as an autonomous car. A lot of other thing goes into this. Talk about why autonomy is not mobility in this case. Walk us through that one.
It's an honest sort of mistake that I've made myself. You think, oh, autonomy. Well, we just need an autonomous chair to move them around, move people around where they want to go. But the fact is, what we all really enjoy is our freedom, our independence. And so this is the device that can grant freedom and independence and allow them to direct their destiny. And now I've also heard it by other users and people who are wheelchair riders, called it the pair of pants I can't take off for 5 years, because they get new ones every 3 to 5 years. And I'd never thought of that. Again, it's a new way of thinking for me, even as a dad. I've had to learn a lot. And but it is this idea that I need to make it incredibly safe and smart so we can begin to progress the technology. And I do think there will be places where a rider, if they choose to, will say, I don't want to deal with my narrow van into my ramp. I want the chair to do this. Or I don't, you know, there's a certain route in my house that's always stressful and I just want to go there. Or I'm talking to someone and I don't want to be paying, if I'm using an eye gaze driving technology, I don't want to have to say go forward. I want the chair to go so I can use my eyes to talk instead. There are places where this advanced technology will have an automatic function, an autonomous function. But the real goal of this is independence and mobility, and allowing them to, you know, have freedom in their life, in their home, but also in the community, and get out. You know, so many riders that we met had an accident or had a bad experience, and so they no longer went out, or they try never to go out, or, you know, they become especially with power chairs. You know, it's a little different, I think, with manual chairs. I don't have as much experience, but it's a little easier to fold those, put them in a car, put them in another vehicle. But once you're dealing with a very large device, you know, that's 300 plus pounds, it starts to become you have to have a plan for what you're doing. And I should probably say, I'm realizing I'm talking about all these things. So I always see Lucy smart technology, but it's an add-on for existing power wheelchairs. Right now, it's a frame of sensors and things that just mounts on with existing bolts, and it fits on there. And the sensors generally, different kinds of sensors working together, sensor fusion, to help it see the environment and keep you from running into walls and driving off curbs and tipping over, because there's so many serious injuries. Now, some of the stats that we're seeing are several years old, and we know there are lots more riders and things going in the world right now, but 175,000 ER trips a year from wound, from injury. Now, about 30,000 plus of those get admitted to the hospital, but it's a world of collision, and it can be. And there's also the collisions cause physical pain. I don't know why I'm thinking of Tammy, but there was a woman we interviewed in Colorado before the product was even finished, just learning about her life and how she wanted to use things. And we interviewed her. A few weeks later, she ran into a wall so hard that it required amputation of toes on her feet. So there's all these injuries that I had never thought of, but now with my daughter and with our working on this, I started to understand. And so that's been what we've been looking at. Most wheelchairs now are 3 inches to 4 inches of drop off they can normally handle, but the average curb is 6 inches. So if you go over, it's you're in the street, and it's a horrible injury because of the physics involved. So that's kind of how we were working on it. But we do collision avoidance and drop off protection right now, and then we're connected to, again, trying to build those connectivities to Alexa and Google and Apple Health, and again, trying to push the whole industry forward in that regard.
Yeah, let's keep talking about that, because another part of the smart message in your material is health and wellness data collection. You're just mentioning the big folks, from the Apples to the Googles and so forth. They're very hot in sort of wearables and so forth nowadays. Talk a little bit about what you envision in terms of what with Apple Watch and these rings and so forth, but what are the types of things that you envision that we could incorporate into the smart wheelchair design for this data collection?
Well, and there's so much that we're trying to sort of broaden that. We put out the little Judging Smart paper. We just put out basically a white paper on safety systems, how they should be tested, what we should look for. I think on the autonomous feature side, we kind of had a roadmap where we start with the safety system. If you know that 10 times a second, sensors and that ARM processor are watching to assist the driver, right? They're not driving for them. They're just assisting them, hopefully making them feel like a great driver, like my car does. Then the next step is you start to add some sort of camera technology, computer vision with dead reckoning. So for instance, we haven't shown it yet, but I was just going to tell you about it. We're about to show where you can use these sort of tags on your van ramp. So it can, if you choose, when it sees those tags, it'll ask, the joystick will ask you, do you want it? You want me to take care of this, or you want to do it? And if you say, I want you to do it, it will drive you up the ramp. So now the tag is allowing an autonomous event to occur. So that's kind of the next level. And then you'll see us adding some AI, machine learning with our sensors and those kinds of things. And finally, you end up with what they call SLAM. And so it's sort of simultaneously you're localizing where you are and you're mapping. So now I'm generating mapping. So I think we'll see the chair. We view the chair as, one user said to us, I just want it to be the control system for my life. I want it to be my sort of, this is how I control my life. And that makes sense. It's probably their most expensive purchase that they have to deal with and navigate. Sorry, we have a little one here. I don't know if you can hear that. And so we think we'll see a lot of driver assistance and safety, but we think we'll also begin to see the ability to do mapping. We're already testing technology that as you're just driving through your world, not connected to your data, I can begin to either map or confirm ramp sites, handicap parking slots, those kinds of things. So that level of data can be shared and begin to make an impact in this community on all levels, but especially for those in a power chair. It's a little harder. It happens, but it's harder to hop a curb in a power chair. And so we'll do some things on that. As far as the seating and health systems, we really feel like, pressure injury is such a big issue, these pressure ulcers. And so we were looking at that going, well, if I can give you anonymized aggregated data of time and seat or shear or various, are they wet, moisture and heat? We know there are certain factors that that deal with, whether someone is prone to pressure injury. And people with chairs like this spend hours and hours and hours in them. And so we thought, well, why don't we try to begin to encourage the whole industry, and we'll do the same to push into that. So we haven't shown it yet, but we'll be showing it in the next few months, different technologies that we're developing and hopefully publishing an open API. So, all the research folks can go, to get the kind of data they need right now. For instance, just taking the most simple metric, time in seat, simple
Okay.
metric. Right now, the most accurate way is to have someone log it themselves. Well, that we felt like we could do better than that.
Yeah.
And so then the other way you can do it is battery use. When I turn my chair on, turn my chair off. But the problem with that is my daughter is a great driver, and she's been taught to turn her chair off whenever she stops to conserve battery.
Yeah.
So if she comes to dinner, she turns her chair off. She goes to the movie, she turns her chair off. And so we realized, let's give accurate time and seat to start with. So we now have real data on time and seat. Now let's get accurate data on this. So we've been kind of pushing along and working with we're having lots of great meetings with other companies to begin to say, what do you wish you could know? How could you help someone if you knew this? Are there other things that and once you have a collection of sensors and an ARM processor and the right connectivity, there's a lot of ability to do actual science, but it just seemed like this particular area had been, held behind. It felt like we kind of had walked into a different time. And so, and this may be a bit forward to say it, but we also felt like we, as a little company coming in, had the opportunity to be the push that all the companies needed to whatever they had worked on that wasn't worth the hassle of bringing to market, right? There's profit being made. And I've never received a mailing from a company in this industry, never received a brochure. I've bought, I don't know, 4 or 5 power chairs, 6 walkers. It's just that would be a cost that's unnecessary. We thought, let's flip it on its head. Let's look to the user and treat them like the customer that they are, and respect and excitement. And let's see what happens if we speak to that side of the equation. So that's how we decided to approach Lucy. So
very
long
cool
answer.
No, it's really cool. It's interesting because just on a recent show, a guest brought up this interesting term I had not heard before called the Internet of Bodies. And in that particular example, it was all about how, if my thing, whatever's monitoring whatever, that, these people over here that are also being monitored via shared data, and if they have COVID, I stay away from them. And there's a whole, it's a very elegant concept what you're doing here. And as you say, in the last part of the message, this connectivity for the grander, connected world, you can only imagine, the possibilities, if someone's lost or, they're going to collide with somebody, my car right now, someone steals it, I can turn it off from my cell phone now. Yeah. So there's, right. There's a lot of interesting possibilities here. And I think, you're really putting together, once again, based on everything that I've read in the materials, a really elegant system that has thought through what we might not really think through, unless you, as in your case, Barry, you've experienced this and you say, hey, there's something here that needs to be disrupted. And I think that's just really, really fascinating. What's next for Lucy? Talk a little bit about the company, where sort of you manufacture currently. Is private company still? What's going on?
We're still private, and we've been self-funded to this point. And now we're in that process now of having those first meetings, talking to investors as we begin to expand. And we've really been, we announced a year ago. Yeah. So we spent several years working and building before we even told anyone what we were doing. And when we announced a year ago, you hope it'll generate excitement, but the truth is you never know, right? And so we've been really welcomed by this community, and we're really grateful for that. And it's been exciting to hear new ideas and new thoughts. Beyond our original 42, the next group will be really interesting because that'll be that open dialogue. And we've been trying very hard to, like we did hosted a panel at South by, trying to reach out to the tech community, the creative community here in Nashville and LA, going, as you think of things, think of our people.
Yeah.
You know, think of our team over here and how Lucy can be used as a bridge. You know, so I think we'll see more interesting interactions. And as an example, in Denver, they have the Smart Cities Alliance.
Yep.
And so Jared has been meeting and working with them, and they're putting in some neat things out there. And you know, our system was built with the hooks in it, so we'd be ready for smart cities. You know, even now, just the simplest little example of, you know, when you come to a crossing, a lot of times the driver is more comfortable at a slower speed, and there's not quite enough time to get across. In a smart city situation, the chair would be communicating, the light would know, and it could hold that light an extra few seconds, just that one to move through. So they've been talking about all kinds of things like that to be able to see. We've seen a lot of reports of people in their ramp van, they come off the ramp in the parking lot, and when they drive out from behind the van, cars in the parking lot don't see them. Well, most modern cars now have a lot of different there's several different systems, but technologies to see people or cars behind other things. That's one of the great, they're trying to solve that in the autonomous car world. So we're trying to pull that technology in over here and go, well, that'll be great. So now we don't have any more of these blind collisions between power chairs and their users. But we're currently manufactured in Colorado, right outside Denver. And one of the big pushes right now has been, you know, we launched on the Permobil brand of chairs, wonderful company, but not the only brand of chairs. And my daughter is in a Permobil, that's where we started. But we just announced that we're on the Sunrise Quickie brand of chairs, and we'll announce at least 2 other brands of chairs in the next few weeks. So that'll put us on 4 of the 5, and we may be on all 5 here in the next few months. But that's been a big lift for us, is to move from, hey, this is a neat thing you could put on that brand, to a standard that kind of lifts all boats, if you will. And so that's been a big push. And as we mentioned, mapping is a big interest for us, and seating is a huge interest for us. And then I think culturally we want to get involved. I mean, so it wouldn't surprise me to see Lucy communication technology and mapping at music festivals or other sorts of things to start kind of taking it back into the culture, you know, and integrating there. So those are some things we're working on right now. But obviously, I think the biggest push right now has been to move. We've been having these meetings for the last year and working on it, but to begin announcing these other brands of chairs, so it's clearly understood, you know, this is a new approach to power wheelchair expectation. And we're about to release another white paper on data and how privacy and security and how we handle it, but also how we think it ought to be handled. And I think even though I'm an unlikely CEO, there's certainly truth to that, a songwriter, but I do think our proximity to Catherine and her friends and the families around them and the clinicians around us, it gave us a very interesting way of making decisions. You know, we didn't do anything that we wouldn't tell people we cared about. You know, we tried to do it the way we wanted to see it. And I think there was a belief that if we were going to self-fund, at least for the first hard lift, we were going to do it the way we thought it ought to be done. And Jared, as the kind of engineering mind he is, you know, and working with our advisors allowed us to really look bigger than we ever imagined looking. And so now we're starting to see a lot of excitement from people outside the industry, the smaller industry, going, hey, this could work with this, or that could work with. So I think there'll be some exciting things. The other thing we're doing is having these investor meetings at the beginning. We just brought on a new CFO, and so it's the growing pains of becoming a company and an industry, but it's an exciting time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's extremely exciting, and honestly, Barry, really wishing you the best with all of this. I mean, obviously, it seems like you have the right structure, and you're putting the right team together for this, and you thought a lot of things that we don't really think about through. So it's just it's really elegant, and I really, I'm wishing you the best with all of it. For for everybody that's going to be listening to this particular episode on the podcast or watching on our YouTube channel, you've been listening to Barry Dean, Chief Executive Officer of Lucy, company reimagining mobility, security, stability, connectivity, and health and wellness for all power wheelchair users around the world. Barry, I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to talk to us for a little while about this. Thank you for everything you're doing, and as we say on our show, thanks for helping to create the better tomorrow through your initiatives. Very inspiring.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. I'm excited for our fans and users to know more about what you're doing. I mean, regenerative medicine, and it's so important for the community I serve. And so, it's I'm about what you're about, which is, getting after it and finding these things and pushing forward. And so it's an honor to be on here. When we started, I remember saying, I don't think that the industry we're in will get there if we don't do something. And I don't know that I have a 10 to 20 years of Catherine's life to wait for someone to go for it. So that's how we got there. And I feel that same thing when I'm listening to these interviews on your podcast. So thanks for letting me be a part of this.
I appreciate that, Barry. It's a great message. Thanks so much for that.